what was so special about the music of those days? Do you think that there was some kind of enlightenment or something?
No, you know what it was? It was just very creative. The melodies were either something that would catch your attention right away, and the lyrics, and it wasn't negative like some of the hip hop and rap music and stuff today. That's very, very negative. It wasn't racist. It wasn't sexual in any sense. It was just great music. And the invention of the 12-string guitar, which England gets the credit for, even though the 12-string guitar didn't get invented there, the use of it and those chords and the things that were played on a 12-string guitar all came over in that big wave of excitement with the Beatles. And every time the Beatles did a song, it was so creatively different that it stimulated you to hear more. So then 10 years after did a song, or the Who did a song, or Edgar Winter, or not Edgar Winter because he was American, but anybody from England, especially Joe Cocker, because he sang such deep, passionate blues from a guy who came from the north of England as the son of a coal miner, and had very little intelligence and very little going for him. But what he did have was a gift. Every sound that came out of that guy was something that gave you chills. He did a song with that Billy Preston wrote called "You Are So Beautiful." And when he sang the song in the studio, we were all there that night. At the end of the song, he went off key. And he was soaking wet with sweat, and he hit the button and he said, "I got to do it again, don't you?" And we were all covered with chills. Every hair on our bodies was standing up because of what happened. It didn't matter, it was off key, it got you. And at the end, where it went to me and it was off, it became a #1 record. And that's why Joe Cocker was used on so many movie soundtracks as well, because of the passionate. When Richard Gere picked up that girl and walked out of her, and The Officer and a Gentleman, and walked out of that factory, and you wanted to cheer, who out of all the bands in the world was used? Joe Cocker. And he sang Up Where We Belong, and you got goose pimples you kept for days, just because of him, that song, and that moment with Richard Gere.
You must have seen a lot. I mean, you must. I don't think there's enough bandwidth in cyberspace to accommodate the stories you have.
Well, I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. A lot of the good stuff are some of the performances the bands did, and the bad were some of the groups that used to give kids drugs without telling them they were drugs in them. I'm not going to say the name, but one band, very famous band, used to take a beer can and inject LSD into the side of the can, so the top was still intact, and offer it to kids. And they would pop the top, drink the beer, and then have hallucinations and get sick and climb trees and jump out and hurt themselves and whatever. And they thought it was funny. So that's the bad. The good stuff is when you go out on stage and you do a performance, you never forget the rest of your life, and everybody holds up a match and walks out talking and telling their friends and everything, and I've seen that too. But what I saw happen to kids, you know, Alice Cooper used to go out on stage and do all these crazy things. He did a Christmas tour once where they brought out, they were singing these songs, and Santa Claus came out with a bag of toys, and these guys snuck out on stage with hoods over their heads and clubs, and they beat him to death. It was Alice Cooper. And all the audience did was cheer. To Alice Cooper, it was theater. All he was doing was something theatrical. But the audience was into it. That's what was scary, were the kids out there that were watching this thing on stage. Some of the Alice Cooper audiences were some of the scariest that I ever was around. I didn't work with Alice, I knew him. And I knew how he used to yell in the microphone in the middle of a song, "I'm putting you on, you idiots," and they wouldn't hear him. But that was that drug age and that whole thing that happened after the Woodstock time period that prompted me to one day want to develop a concept about that was anti-drug, and led me to writing a novel about those days, a wild and crazy novel with a big love story, but with an anti-drug theme.
Well,
so anybody who took drugs in this story is not a hero, was an idiot, and looked at that way.
With all that constant day-to-day visual of the drugs, the getting high and this and that, I mean, it must have. Were you influenced by that, or?
Two things kept me away from it, which is why I'm one of the few guys who's still alive from that time period. Most of my friends are gone. is most importantly, my love and respect for my mother and father. I didn't want to do anything ever that would hurt my mother's feelings, break her heart, make my dad feel bad. That was number one. Number two, I was conscious of my health, and I spent a lot of time trying to get rid of the frustration of the pace I kept by going to gyms and health clubs and so forth. And also because of some of the horrendous things I saw people do under the influence of drugs, I just didn't want any part of that, take any chance. It was something that I considered that the idiots did. And the idiots, some of those idiots were my colleagues. But I say this now in all respect because they were my friends back then, but they're gone now.
I mean, this is no joke here. This is the real deal, folks. There's gold records, platinum from movies. I mean,
oh, movies.
Yeah.
I worked on a lot of movies over the years. I go all the way back to Saturday Night Fever. And interestingly enough, the choreographer who taught John Travolta how to dance in that movie, we hired him as an actor in a movie called Thank God It's Friday with Donna Summers and the Commodores. He was the little Spanish guy, if you can remember, that danced on the roof of the cars in the parking lot to the beat of the music. And when the director and the other people in the crew brought him out and showed him how to jump on those cars, he said, just turn the camera on. He turned the camera on, he did it in one take. So if you ever see a movie called Thank God It's Friday, and you see a little Spanish guy jumping on cars and dancing, that's the choreographer that worked with John Travolta in Saturday Night Fever. I had a band at the time called Kool and the Gang. And I was trying to get involved in the soundtrack of the movie, and I was able, if you remember the Puerto Rican kids that danced against John Travolta and his girlfriend, they did a better dance than him, yet they gave the trophy to John Travolta, and they should have given it to the Spanish kids, Puerto Ricans. And what happened was the song called Open Sesame was something that I put on that soundtrack, and we made a lot of money with it, and it happened to be a focal point of the movie. I also worked on Sgt. Pepper and Thank God It's Friday, and I worked on a couple of movies recently, and a book I wrote, it's very close to being a movie right now, and this rock and roll novel that I wrote, Jim, is it was optioned by one of the most famous producers in the world. That's where, as a writer for hire, if anybody should ever email me that needs help, aside from being in the Writers Guild of America, the very first thing I ever wrote as a writer, I was paid over $300,000 for from one of the most famous producers in the world, who made 104 movies, won 3 Oscars for AFCO Embassy, including The Graduate and all the Sophia Loren movies. And that was the first thing I wrote. So I've helped a lot of people as a writer for hire. And what I don't do when I work with people is I don't take on anything just to make a couple of bucks. I'll look at it. If I see that the story can go somewhere and be successful, it has a good conflict, a good crisis and resolution, and it makes sense, then I will go to a producer that I know when it's done and submit it, or to one of my agents. I'm represented as a screenwriter in California and as an author in New York, and aside from my guild representation. So I know everybody. I've been in the show business my whole life. So say you wrote something and you brought it to me, I would tell you the truth. I would say, this needs too much work, I'm not going to take your money. Or I would say, you know what, let's work on this, let's get the structure really good. It's interesting with screenplays. For example, if you write a screenplay that's not properly structured and the story is magnificent, producers will look at it, see that the structure is not good, think you're not a good writer, or you're immature or an amateur, and they put it right in a shredder. However, if you write a really good structured story, and according to Writers Guild rules, it all fits, even if it's not a great story, it'll get a serious read every time, and you'll have more of a chance. Therefore, if you've got a story that's good as a story, and it's structured well, you've got a great chance. And this is the stuff that I work on when I take on a student and try to teach them that. I've been teaching also here for 5 years. I've been teaching screenwriting, and one of my students who took my course twice, I took one of his stories to a producer and ended up on the Sci-Fi Channel. So we've had some success with that.